How about them Cowboys? Come on.
There it is. Football is back, baby. What's going on, everybody?
Quickly recapping, coming off of Sunday night football, probably the worst game of the day, truly to watch. Just talk about a game that was over about 30 minutes in at halftime. Um, wow. Wow. What a master class. Obviously on our podcast, we made the picks. I always take the team the Cowboys playing just because, I have that security blanket if they lose outright. I'll take the player or I'll take the pick and the team on the spread against them. So I have a 1-for-1 regardless. But wow, 40-0. Talk about all facets of the game. Special teams, fantastic. Defense, fantastic. Offense was good enough. They didn't have to do a whole lot last night. It's kind of been the big negatives on the sports shows this morning is their offense didn't look good. Their offense didn't do enough. And it's like, whenever you're starting out 16-0 with a defensive touchdown and a special teams touchdown in the heavy rain, it's like you want Dak Prescott to go out there and throw for 300 yards and 3 tuds. It's like, no, let's go ahead and get the run. Let's get out of this game. Let's get out of this weather. So quickly recapping, let's get into the key matchups that we did in the preview a few days ago. The first one was the trenches. Obviously, both sides of the line is the most important part of a football game, in my opinion. If you have a terrible offensive line or if you're a terrible defensive line, you're going to get exposed on both sides of the ball. Looking at this matchup, Dallas just owned both sides of the line. That defense, the Giants' offensive line stood no shot. Coming into the game, we know they had a couple of talented tackles on the outside in Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. Obviously, the rookie center, we saw a rookie mistake on that first drive with that bad snap that ultimately led to the blocked field goal return for the touchdown. So Dallas's defensive line dominated with 7 sacks on Daniel Jones. I don't know how many pressures they had, but that first half alone, it looked like Daniel Jones was just running for his life. Really could never get comfortable in the pocket. 7 sacks, as mentioned, is crazy. And you look at Dallas's offensive line against that Giants D line, 0 sacks for that Giants D line. But then again, Dallas wasn't throwing it all over the lot. And, they weren't really bootlegging and trying to extend that long play. So no sacks for the Giants, kept Dak Prescott really clean. Really, I think the only hit he took all night, he took one in the pocket and he took one on the scramble down by the goal line. So talking about Dallas's defense as well, 4 forced fumbles for the defense. They only recovered one of them, and that was the Trayvon Diggs punch out of Isaiah Hodgins after a nice 24-yard catch and run. 2 other fumbles, both got recovered by the Giants. Dallas turned over Daniel Jones twice with 2 interceptions. Obviously, Deron Bland on the Trayvon Diggs hit on Saquon Barkley on the little 3 or 4 yard route out of the backfield, popped up in the air, pick 6. That was the first interception. Really not on Daniel Jones' fault at all. It's wet. It's rainy. Saquon probably has to hold on to that ball. The second one, though, was terrible. It was 1st and 10, flag on the play already for the Giants offensive line. Daniel Jones is rolling out. Just throw that ball into the stands. Instead, he tries to throw a cross body to the sideline to make a play. Stephon Gilmore, welcome to the show. Welcome to the team. Interception number 1. The Giants did force one forced fumble. It was on Tony Pollard on a run, but Dallas's offensive line recovered it, and then we ended up scoring a touchdown a couple plays later. So a pretty clean game for Dallas all around, pretty sloppy game for New York. And as a Dallas fan, I was loving it. But at some point in the first half, I was like, this is kind of hard to watch, just how bad it was. The second key matchup we had preview the game was Deonte Banks against either Michael Gallup or Brandon Cooks outside. I didn't think he'd be a lot on, have a lot of action on CeeDee Lamb. But also, I didn't realize the Giants were starting 2 rookie cornerbacks. First team since 2008 to start both of their starting cornerbacks to be rookies. Big disadvantage for that defense because that's really tough. Obviously, the rules are the exact same going from college to NFL, but NFL refs are just a little more nitpicky. That didn't really cost the Giants last night. They didn't have any. I mean, they had that one pass interference. I think it was 3rd and 12. It was kind of a deep ball to Brandon Cooks. That was the big, corner defensive back penalty that really hurt the Giants. But other than that, Deonte Banks, he did only play the first half. He left at halftime with cramps, and it was 26-0 at halftime. So your rookie corner that you took fairly early in the draft, you're going to go ahead and just let him sit and rest. No need to push it. No need to further injure himself. But in that half he played, he had 2 passes defended, and he had 1 assisted tackle. The big highlight play was on the goal line fade or the goal line out to Ferguson. Giants linebacker underneath. Ferguson goes up with one hand. Deonte Banks comes off his guy who he was guarding on the boundary to come to the middle of the field to help break that up. That was kind of the big play he had that really caught my eye. The third key here, the key matchup, was Leighton Vander Esch against these Giants tight ends. We talked extensively in the preview about how the Giants like to bootleg play action. They like to hit the tight ends across the middle and these underneaths and get them a nice catch and run opportunity. Leighton Vander Esch tied the Dallas lead with 6 tackles in the game. Tie the team lead with 6 tackles. And then you look at the tight ends for the Giants. Darren Waller caught 3 of his 5 targets for 36 yards, no touchdowns. Daniel Bellinger caught his only target for 1 yard. So, I mean, you're telling me four passes for the tight ends for 37 yards. I mean, you're not going to get killed in any instance with that. The fourth key matchup in the preview was Dak Prescott against himself. Obviously, Dak didn't light it up, but he didn't have to. 13 of 24 passing, 143 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. The 0 turnovers were the big thing in the preview. Dak Prescott against himself in the decision making and in the arrogant, kind of erratic turnover worthy throws. He didn't really have any of those last night. 13 of 24 is a little concerning, but you look at the weather. It was a sloppy, rainy game, and there was a fair amount of drops on Dallas' side. I saw a stat this morning that 23.4% of Dak Prescott's passes last night were dropped in week 1, and that was the highest rate of dropped by any quarterback in the NFL. So looking back on Thursday night when Patrick Mahomes obviously struggled, or the Chiefs offense struggled, I should say, and a couple of his receivers, dropped some balls. Kadarius Toney was the big one. The kind of talk around the town was, the receivers let him down. Well, Dak Prescott had a higher percentage of his passes dropped, and Richard Sherman this morning is talking about how 54% completion is not good enough. Well, guess what? When you have 24% of your passes dropped, that's going to hurt your completion percentage. Richard, relax. So Dak, no turnovers. That was a big one. Obviously, last year only played 12 games, tied the league lead in interceptions last year. No picks. Good start week 1, Dak. Third and final key matchup was Tony Pollard against Saquon Barkley. And obviously the stats here are not going to be dependent on the players themselves, however, the game around them. Meaning, obviously, Dallas had a lead early. They had a lead throughout. They're going to be running the ball. You got to kill the clock. You got to get this game over with. Dallas is going to be running the ball, whereas the Giants are behind the 8 ball. They're going to have to throw it a little more. They're going to have to get out of those bootlegs they like to do and throw it way more. So Tony Pollard had 14 carries, had 70 yards on those 14 carries, 2 touchdowns. Got 2 of his 3 targets for 12 yards, kind of pedestrian on the receiving side of things. But when you look at the rushing aspect, last year he was 18 carries for 60 yards, no tud. This year, 4 less carries, 10 more yards, 2 more tuds. Much better, Tony Pollard. Obviously, that helps with no Ezekiel Elliott as well. Saquon Barkley on the night, 12 carries, 51 yards, no touchdowns. He got 3 of his 4 targets for 12 yards as well. So he was fairly pedestrian out of the backfield as far as the receiving aspect. He did get over 4 yards per carry, but as I talked about, the Giants were down multiple scores early in the game. You're not going to run the ball because you don't have time to afford to lose by running the ball. So Tony Pollard did get the better of Saquon Barkley in this matchup specifically. But as I mentioned, that's so dependent on the game around them, not to mention Dallas's defense versus the Giants defense and the Dallas's O-line versus the Giants O-line. So there's several aspects going into that matchup, a lot more than it looks like on paper. It's really hard to do head-to-head with 2 running backs. So the X factors we talked about, I gave 2 on each side of the ball I gave 1 on each side of the ball for both teams. The first one was Leighton Vander Esch, as I already talked about above. I said he'd be a huge X factor in this game, defending Darren Waller, defending Daniel Bellinger for the Giants on these bootlegs they like to run. He had 6 tackles, which was tied for the team lead, as I mentioned before. And the Dallas's defense overall really held down these Giants receivers and just the whole Giants offense in general. The second Cowboy I talked about being an X factor was Jake Ferguson. With the departure of Dalton Schultz this year, obviously Jake Ferguson boosted himself to that tight end number 1 position. Dak's a security blanket in those third downs and down in the red zone. It's always been his tight ends. You look at Ferguson, 7 targets last night, came out of the jump with 3 on that first drive, only caught 2 of his 7 balls for 11 yards. He didn't have a reception really after that first drive. Couple of drops himself too, but I don't want to put that too much on him. Although he's a professional, you're going to play in the rain. You're going to need to catch those balls in the rain when it matters most. But the elements played a role in that for sure. But he only got 2 of his 7 targets, 11 yards. We're going to need more than that as an X factor next game. Looking on the Giants side of the things, Deonte Banks as an X factor, I listed. He only played the first half of football. They rested him the second half. 2 pass breakups, 1 assist attack on the first half. That Giants defense wasn't on the field a bunch in that first half. So I'd say that was a solid first half for Deonte Banks. Obviously, we didn't get to see the whole sample size with the full game and in a close game and all that. The Giants offensive X factor I listed was Darren Waller, and as I already talked about, he got 3 of his 5 targets for 36 yards and 0 touchdowns. Fairly pedestrian. He got his first target, or I think he got his first target, or at least his first catch when they were already down. I think it was 19-0 when he got his first catch. So it's like you waited way too long to get him involved in your offense. So those were the X factors and kind of how they performed during the game. For the X factors we had listed before the game. So getting into the 5 keys of victory I listed for the Cowboys in the pregame. The first one was limiting their mistakes, not only the turnovers, but also the penalties. I put in the pregame, 1 or less turnovers would be fantastic. That's a huge key to victory. If they get 1 turnover or less than 1 turnover, I think they win. They had 0 turnovers last night. Very clean football game. Only 5 penalties for 35 yards. This one was a concern because on that first drive, really kind of the only time of the game I was nervous when the Giants got the ball to open the game and kind of marched a little bit. Dallas sloppily got a 15-yard penalty for a late hit when Daniel Jones was sliding. But you look at the rest of the game, 4 penalties for 20 yards. The rest of the game following that, they cleaned it up tremendously. And of course, them being up so many points really allowed them to play more conservative. The second key to victory was Dallas to get 25 plus rushing attempts. This seems pretty elementary. If you're a balanced offense, you should have 25 to 30 rushing attempts every game. But Dallas, as of late, as far as the last couple of years, they get cute. They try to abandon the run game at times. So them getting 25 plus rushing attempts, I think, is going to be a huge contributing factor to their success going forward. They had 30 combined carries in this game. They got 5 different guys to carry the ball. And obviously, when the game's 40-0, you're allowed. It allows more guys to come in and get some of those game reps. Of those 30 rushing attempts, Tony Pollard got 14 of them. I'd like to see that boosted to 17, 18. But in a blowout, rest your guy. No need to take extra shots you don't need. The third key to victory was limiting Saquon Barkley, which I think they did a very good job of. Obviously, getting out to that early lead limits the Giants' running attack. Saquon had 12 rushes for 51 yards, which, is a little over 4 carries. So, that's a really good game. 4 and more carries, solid. He only caught 3 balls for those 12 yards. So on 15 touches, he had 63 yards, which is just a touch over 4 yards per touch. If you're telling me Saquon Barkley is only getting 63 yards of total offense, I would say the Giants' offense is in trouble. The fourth one here was limiting the play action, and obviously that goes with limiting Saquon Barkley. If Saquon's running all over you, that play action is going to be wide open all game. If you stop Saquon, that play action is going to be tough to run and tough to fool the defense. I didn't get a stat on what the percentages were for the amount of play action versus just straight dropbacks in the game for the Giants. And also I didn't get a stat on, that percentage if there was some successful play action plays or if there was, the success versus fail rate as far as play action plays go. The early deficit, as I mentioned, and then plus that pass rush from the Dallas, hounding Daniel Jones all night. It's tough to want to try to run a play fake and give those defenders that extra second and a half to, still come after the quarterback and not, sell out for the run on that play. So the Giants really just abandoned that early on last night. My fifth and final key to the victory was make your field goals, which field goals, I guess, is the key word here. Brandon Aubrey, who I did a little bit more research into last night. Obviously, my only research on him so far this year was he's the new guy in town replacing Brett Maher. He's a legend on Madden already. Brandon Audrey's automatic. But I did a little research today. And, obviously after that blocked field goal touchdown for Dallas, he came out and kicked probably the worst extra point I've seen in a while. Just knuckled it way left, never close from the start. And immediately I looked at my buddy Nate, who I was watching the game with. And I said, here we go again. However, talking about making your field goals, he was 2 of 2 on his field goals. He ended up being 4 of 5 on extra points. So after that first shank job, he made 6 straight kicks, 6 of 7 on kicks. I'll take that every day of the week. I prefer 7 of 7, but I'll take 6 of 7. That's a great rate. We're talking about Brandon Aubrey here. Great backstory. Do some research on this guy. Fantastic story. He was a 4-star recruit out of high school to play soccer. Hadn't played football since middle school. 4-star recruit out of high school to play soccer. Goes to Notre Dame, one of the best soccer, men's soccer teams in the country. One of the only few guys on that team that's a freshman to get playing minutes in a national championship victory for Notre Dame. Gets drafted in the first round of the MLS draft in 2017 as the 21st overall pick. Plays for a couple of years. You know what? This isn't me. I don't really enjoy this all that much. 2019 leaves the MLS. He becomes a software engineer. I'm good with sports. I've had my fill, whatever. Watching football games with his wife, after watching these kickers miss kick after kick, he's like, you know what? Maybe that's something I can do. So he hires a kicking coach during COVID, right? Starts getting the technique, start feeling it out. gets picked up by the Birmingham Stallions of the USFL in 2022. He's going to be their kicker. 1 year later, he breaks camp with the Dallas Cowboys, and he's the starting kicker for the Dallas Cowboys. 3 years ago, he was sworn off of sports. I'm done. I'm never doing it. You know what? Maybe I can kick. Maybe I can kick. 1 year in the USFL being a professional kicker. You know what? Dallas Cowboys, the biggest brand in sports. Let me go ahead and be their kicker. Fantastic story. 6 of 7 on kicks. Good for you, Brandon Aubrey. I'm a fan. So we get into my prediction before the game. And when you look at the total points, I was kind of spot on with the total here. I projected the final score to be 23-16 Dallas, which is 39 combined points. Well, the final score ended up being 40-0 Dallas for 40 combined points. So I was only one off on the total, way off on the score prediction. But however, I did say take the under in this game and take the Cowboys to cover. 2 for 2. So we'll see. What does Dallas need to do better going forward? Obviously, we got to catch more passes. The defense looks stout. I really don't have anything defensively to fix. Just got to be better offensively on securing these catches. And that's really it. The O-line looked great. Tony Pollard running the ball looked great. Dak Prescott didn't have to do a lot, but he didn't, they didn't ask him to. So I don't know. Big fan of this Dallas team going forward. We have a little overreactions in our power rankings going forward this week. You'll have to stay tuned and see for our show on Friday. Thanks, guys, for watching. All right. I hope I didn't go too long in that analysis. I feel like I was like 15 minutes at it this time, but hell yeah, I hope that's solid. I trust you to not do me dirty in the edits. All right, let's end this bitch. Get out of here. I hope the audio was fine too. I really kind of talked in this monotone the whole time. All right. Peace.